Welcome to South of Left Field. My name is Jimmy, and our topic for today is going to start with inequality, and we'll just see where this little ramble goes. Inequality is something that was first really put on the main stage of politics by a certain Bernie Sanders back in the 2016 presidential race. Now, this topic seemed to resonate with a lot of Americans today, and I can understand why. What I would like to do is approach this with a minimum of data and statistics. I do this because, well, I like something that Mark Twain related, something that he himself had heard, that there are basically lies in three increasingly horrific levels. There are lies, there are damned lies, and there are statistics at the bottom of the heap. So what I've done is sort of spent a lot of time looking on sites like the Congressional Budget Office site, the Federal Reserve site, business reports, and of course I've touched on books. I think one of my favorites was Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty. This gentleman did a mind-numbing dive into pulling up large amounts of data and analyzing it. And believe me, folks, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. It was just hard to digest. But that, The Great Leveler by a Princeton professor whose name escapes me at the moment, and other sources, I feel like I've developed sort of a sense of inequality. And I can sum it up in a way that's not going to surprise, I'm sure, anyone, and that is that inequality is getting worse. In broad terms, we were a more egalitarian, that is low inequality society when we came out of the Second World War. Actually, a number of the countries, the developed countries, in the winning side of that war, and even on the losing side before it was all said and done, found themselves with less inequality. Some of this reduction in inequality was deliberate, and I'll hopefully touch back around on that later. But again, keeping to the broad strokes, the United States of America at the time, in the 50s, which was considered a golden age, incomes were higher across the board in many ways. The distribution of wealth, and that is your net worth. When I say distribution of wealth, I'm talking about who owned stocks, who owned bonds, who had a nice savings account, who had pensions, who had retirement savings in one form or another, who owned homes. I mean, all of these things add to a person's net worth, and that net worth is wealth. So the distribution of wealth was, well, a little more egalitarian, a little more even, if you will, back then. That's not to say there was not inequality, but it wasn't an inequality that overly stifled the life of Americans and the ability of Americans to move up and down the economic scale, because the jobs were better paying jobs back then. People had more wealth to draw on, fall back on. Life just seemed a whole lot better. Now, going to some hard numbers, and I'm not going to throw a lot of numbers at you. Going to some hard numbers, Federal Reserve website has a breakdown of the distribution of how much wealth was in different groups of people's hands. And for this, let's break America into the 10% and break America into the 90%. And remember, America is made up of Americans. So anything that hurts us hurts the country. And anything that makes us weak, makes us poor, and makes us, fight among each other, these are all things that weaken America because they weaken us. So what did we find in 1989? Wealth, and I'm going to focus on wealth here because it's the number that's the easiest for me to dig out and find, and I think it communicates most strongly. Wealth was divided like this. Here's my 10 kids lined up. I yank one kid out, say, hey, you're going to be the 10% in this in America. Here is $10 that I have in my hands. And we're going to pretend that this represents the entire wealth of America. All the wealth put together. And I'm going to show you what America was like in 1989, folks. That's where the Federal Reserve table started. I'm going to give $6 to our lone kid and I'm going to give 4 to the remaining 9. And that's how wealth was divided in 1989. Now, the long-term trends that I've looked at, and that's generally acknowledged on the economic sites and the regulatory sites and everything else, said inequality grew very, very slowly from the end of the Second World War to about 1970. It started in 1970. Things began to go south, and not in a good way. Not south of left field, but they began to go south because inequality began to increase. So in 1989, here's our kid. He's got $6. And everybody else, all the other 9, they've got $4. And that's how the wealth was divided up in the United States today. Now this table on the Federal Reserve goes from 1989 to 2019. A nice 30-year table. So in 30 years, and bear in mind that our government was run by only 2 political parties on all that time, and going further back too. But in that 30 years, what happened? To reflect what happened, I'm going to reach over to the 9. I'm going to take $1 away. Sorry guys, you only got 3 now. I'm going to give that dollar to the 10%. I'm going to give it to the 1. He's got 7. They've got 3. And since I count myself part of the broad population of America, part of the 90% being retired on a fixed income, yeah, it hits me. And so that right there should hopefully make it a little bit real to you. I mean, there should be a visceral reaction when we give thought to why things seem to be getting tougher in America. Now, income is a trickier slope, and I don't dive into income a lot, but I will say this. If the wealth is concentrating up in the top, and again, let's go back to what wealth is. Wealth is net worth. If the wealth is concentrating to the top, that means they're the ones who own the stocks. They're the ones who own the bonds. They're the ones who own the real estate. They're the ones who own the factories. They're the ones who are owning more and more and more of the wealth, and it's all going upstairs. 90% of us, our incomes, and I'm going to ignore the people who want to confuse me with statistics and inflation adjustments and all this other bull hockey. Our income's got to be shrinking. My gut tells me our incomes are shrinking. The struggles of my children and the struggles I see from my grandchildren tell me that incomes are shrinking. And the fact that the wealth that's held by us, the 90, and yes, I'm going to do an us versus them, the wealth held by us, the 90, has shrunk from 40% of the nation's wealth to 30% of the nation's wealth. And it's still shrinking. So now here's the thing. Remember, income inequality was way higher in 1910, before the First World War, the Great Depression, and the Second World War. The reduction in inequality that was achieved through those wars was largely done by the government. Because here's the thing nobody really wants to get into in the political races today. It's not that these elite, super rich people are geniuses. Do I think they're worth tens of billions of dollars? No, I don't. Do I think it's just that they have that much? No, I don't. Does it damage the well-being of America and Americans because they have so much and we have so little? Yeah, darn tootin' it does. We should be upset about this. And what we do about it matters. Because I can guarantee you the levers that were pulled and the regulations that were put into place and the forces that were brought to bear during those great events in the past, the World Wars and the Great Depression, those forces that were brought to bear by the government in the form of regulations, laws, and tax tables. The government is the only entity in the United States of America that has the power to change how income and wealth flow and are concentrated in this country today. And if you think the 2 parties that are running the shooting match today are going to be able to do a doggone thing about it, then let me challenge you on that point. because these two parties have been in power for 150 years. They were in power during the war, during the Great Depression. They've been in power since the end of the Second World War. They are in power today when the inequality is growing by the year. And the only thing I hear out of the candidates is somebody might occasionally mention, hey, let's put the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That is a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. That, don't get me wrong, it'll do a little bit, but it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop the concentration of power. It's not going to stop the concentration of wealth. If we want it done in a peaceful way, we have to do it at the ballot box. So, tune in. Tune in for the next one, because I'm going to talk some more on that topic. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been entertaining and enlightening for you, and I certainly hope it's caused you to think. If you got your blood boiling, that's good too. I hope to hear from you. I hope to see you again. I hope you get to listen to me again. Thank you.